Yes, hello, folks. Welcome to the weekly Manchester United podcast. I'm your host, as always, Phil Brown, on this Tuesday rather than a Monday. We had Memorial Day here in the US yesterday, and still celebrating the weekend's cup final win. First of all, mate, how was your weekend?
Yeah, it was good. It was it was a good start Saturday morning to things. It was overall a very
I
nice
was.
time in general, and long holiday weekend as well. So really relaxing and a good.
Did you do anything yesterday for Memorial Day?
Our pool opened, so it was lots of outside, lots of the pool kind of neighborhood events and things like that. But just that's about it.
We were pool too. I was hoping some of my kids would drown, and in that way, responsibility was lighting up a bit over the summer, getting back to my old single self, just getting out there again.
That might
But
be relevant to a topic today, voluntary resignation. We can talk about that soon.
well, we will quickly segue out of what I've just said there before I self-incriminate myself here. So, nonetheless, it was a fun weekend, and I'm just joking in case my kids are listening to this. I love you very much. But fantastic result at the weekend. One I did not see coming. I
Yeah.
think I mentioned on this podcast a week ago that I said, the Arsenal game, I didn't see United winning any of their last 3-4 games. They won 3 out of 4. And I have to say, I'm extremely pleasantly surprised how they won the game. Because if you look at how they've beat City, you'd probably have to go back to Solskjaer right before COVID, where they were that convincing. Most of the time, it's been by a narrow goal here or there, and De Gea has played outstanding, and he's pulled off some unbelievable saves, and we've just scraped over the line. But I thought that the way they played against City tactically, Ten Hag's taken a lot of criticism, deservedly so. I thought was perfect. I mean, City win when they have to win, always. With the odd exception, of course, if they lose, they'll lose to someone like Real Madrid on penalties. But even if you look at Real Madrid in the possession stats when they played City, they surrendered the ball. I thought Martinez was transformative. United, not just in how he defends, but how they attack. You can see they're a much different football team with the best, and that's not even their best, United's best team, but the majority of their players available. And I know inevitably our Ten Hag's future will be discussed on this podcast. I'm tired of talking about it as much as everyone else is tired of hearing about it. But nonetheless, it is a topic until any of us address it. I don't think it should come down to one game. Teams have said that before, but that is huge in terms of the balance of discussion for keeping Ten Hag or for not in Ten Hag's favour. Some people won't see it that way, but if I'm Keys Foss, that to me is something I would use significantly in a discussion with anyone.
Yeah, I think it was a good game. I think it was kind of perfect as far as you could want it to go, in terms of what you have, in terms of players, in terms of all of that. I think it was about as good as you could get in the performance to win that game. I think it was, I don't know that I've seen City that nullified outside of specifically the game you mentioned was the last one before the COVID lockdowns under Solskjaer where they won 2-0 at home. The last time I saw a good performance like that against City, where they were just completely shut down to doing practically nothing the entire game. I mean, City looked like a team that had no idea what to do. Guardiola made 2-3 changes at halftime to throw on Jeremy Doku to try to do something. He got a little bit of joy. I know he got a goal, that was a bit, maybe Onana could have done a little better. It was not a high percentage shot, certainly by any measure. I would say, one of the things I want to say about it is it's real interesting because obviously we've had a player I want to mention, and that is Wan-Bissaka, who we've had a lot of obvious discussions over. But Wan-Bissaka has performed really well in 2 finals now that United have won trophies in. He was really good in the second half when he was brought on against Newcastle last year, against St. Maxim, when he was causing quite a bit of trouble. And he was really good. Yeah, he was really good this time. And in the cup run, he was really good at making Mo Salah completely ineffective earlier against Liverpool. He did nothing the whole game. And it's an interesting one when you look at a player like that, because he's had a difficult year also, and almost like a little bit of a like a micro macro look at when you look at things like that. Again, a player like Wan-Bissaka, who, based on that game, you say, is he a player worth keeping when he can do stuff like that in important games? Is there anybody else who can do that in important games, who just shuts something down? And, I'm not saying he was the best player in the game, because there's other performers in there, but it's something unique when someone can go at him one-on-one for 45 minutes, 50 minutes and get nothing, and get really nothing. It's interesting that it's just wanted to kind of call that out specifically, because I think it's almost comparable in certain ways to Ten Hag, where you have a rough year and then you look and say, there's something there. That was good, but is that something that you weigh up against everything else, or is that something you accept and say, all right, well, that happens, but it's not enough to on the regular.
Well, to me, we know what his strengths and weaknesses are. You put the ball in front of Wan-Bissaka, he's the best one-on-one defender in the world, in my opinion. Stand-up defender. His timing and his tackles is fantastic. I know he made one mistake. I think it was against Liverpool with the Harvey Elliott, where he went to ground. I think it was Harvey Elliott who cut inside. But that's any defender. Defender's going to get one or two wrong here or there. And ball in front of him, he is the best one-on-one defender in the world. Where I think, you'll have to have question marks is how good is he with the ball, where he has to sense situational awareness, where he has to sense players running over his shoulders. I'm not sure he's the best at that. I don't think he offers you a lot going forward. Some players can play different positions because of their skill set, and some players can't. Wan-Bissaka can't play left back. It's not fair to him. In the same way, I don't think it was fair to Casemiro to play him centre back or to play Amrabat at left back, because it's just not the position, and that's how you ruin a player's confidence. So, he is brilliant if you're under pressure, especially in a counter-attacking team that sits a bit deeper, where a lot of the play is going to be in front of you. So, the problem is he doesn't give you a lot going forward. And, we'll get into this a bit later when we're done talking about the game, but these are the ruthless decisions that any of us are going to have to make. Good might have got you a career at United under Woodward, under Richard Arnold, but good doesn't win you the league. And these are the tough questions that any of us have to answer. The answers that I'm sure they're going to have to answer about Ten Hag too. But we'll get into that a little bit later. I just don't want to bask in the glory of the show, of the game of the weekend. Predictably, James, and I said this on Friday when Jacob Steinberg, I believe it was, from The Guardian, put that story out, which about Ten Hag definitely being sacked, which was just one in a long line, where he said, look, the club are going to put Ten Hag in this position. Regardless of what happens, well, if you need a win, lose, or draw, the story's going to be about his future.
Yeah.
And to me, yes, I can understand people getting upset that Gary Lineker and Alan Shearer for some of the coverage was definitely disrespectful. But it is a massive story, and the club could have addressed it. There's obviously different reasons why they didn't. Again, we'll get into that in a bit. But I don't think you can blame people asking Ten Hag. If I'm Ten Hag, my frustrations with the owners.
I'd have the same question if I'm him, right? What is my future all about? So.
Yeah. I mean, but anyway, on a plus side, James, when you looked at that Crystal Palace game, this performance was 2.5 weeks ago, seemed impossible. I think City won their last 8 league games in a row to win the Premier League. Nobody saw this coming. And to me, I think you have to give Ten Hag credit, because there's been times, like Crystal Palace, for example, where he deserved almost criticism. But he has shown, first of all, he clearly knows how to set a football team up. Secondly, the players obviously look like they're behind him. I'm sure there's some players in that dressing room that aren't, but collectively it certainly looked that way, and you can only judge based on what you see. And I think, like I've said before, Martinez is so transformative to how United attack and defend that it's such an obvious difference when he plays and when he doesn't play.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, obviously overall, where I have no complaints about it, and I think it's correct, and is that it was a good pragmatic performance from the team to play within their strengths and do the things that work, for them and that they're good at. I thought it was an interesting choice in the starting lineup to include, Rashford and keep Hoyland on the bench to start.
Mhm.
He's made more of an impact off the bench recently. I thought Rashford had a really good game set up the way that they set up, where it was a bit more within his general wheelhouse, being the outlet ball. The pass to Garnacho for the second goal was excellent. Something he used to do quite a bit more. And I thought it made a nice setup having the pace of those two on the wings with the middle not being so stretched with a striker running forward, but with Bruno and Scott kind of clogging up the center. And that was, I think, the game plan, right? Was stop them down the center, don't open up the middle so much, and attack down the wings. And it really, really worked to nullify City, but also keep them honest the whole game. They had to keep watching for Rashford and Garnacho runs over the top balls to
Mhm.
them. And that was a huge part of allowing, there's games where United have sat in deeper, but the pressure builds and it builds and it builds and it builds. And there's no like release, there's no like steam release on the thing to let it out. They had it, the release on both sides. And it resulted in the goals that happened, being able to release that pressure. And it didn't allow City to do what they usually do, which is to just
Mhm.
continuously just sustain and push you further in until you practically in your own net and the ball finds its way in. So it was the right. It was yeah. There was nothing else I think you can do to get that right against City and
Well,
to succeed. I think it was fantastic.
isn't Vardy the most expensive defender in the world?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he that was quite a that was quite a header by him. That was a
I
good a
mean, to
good a
me,
good pass.
I don't know. The one place you don't head it straight back down the middle of the top of your keeper, put it wide, do anything, let it go, but that's the one thing you don't do.
And that's
You
one of
know,
those odd things I've seen, like you get a little bit in the playing out of back of modern days is people taking that risk to head it to their keeper a lot.
mm,
Why? Why not just head it
James,
towards the
I'm telling you,
sidelines?
I'm supposed this happens in all sports where they get these fetishes, and
Yeah.
they are fashionable for a while, but the over fetishization of playing out from the back, I understand why teams do it because once you knock a ball long, you surrender possession, it becomes a 50-50 ball. At that point, you want to keep possession. But the
Yeah.
cost benefit of it, because how many times do we see in the Premier League or top leagues around the world catastrophic mistakes in defense or from a
Yeah.
goalkeeper that leads to a goal from overplaying out from the back? I understand why they do it. I once had Franz Hoek explain to me, who of course worked for United with Van Gaal, how Van Gaal did it at Bayern
Mhm.
and how they got into the second lines, which was truly fascinating. I mean, I've talked to United players who've told me that Van Gaal was the greatest coach they had. Coach, manager, different thing, of course, but it's massively over fetishized though to the point where goalkeepers are valued for attributes that almost have nothing to do with goalkeeping. It's almost like we're looking for a bunch of John O'Shea's with gloves on, that can play from the
Yeah.
back. And Onana to me is a microcosm of United season. So
Yep.
many unbelievable individual moments of greatness and then moments of incredible calamity where you're like, am I just watching the same goalkeeper that just, I don't understand. Like it's hard to praise and it's hard to criticize because there's always a contradiction that says
Yep.
you're wrong. It's hard to have a firm opinion. So if you were, I think Onana should have saved that. And inevitably, I'm sitting there going, there's no way they would win this game 2-0. They've never had anything this comfortable all season. They're going to concede late, and it's going to be a night, touching cloth and of course they concede. Right? From a
Yep.
goal, they shouldn't concede. That make City do something special. And again, you're just left with such conflicting thoughts on things. Like with Onana, like I could easily point to some unbelievable moments of brilliance, and I could point to massive calamities. I mean,
Yep.
but I have to say, man, I was impressed how United handled going with that City goal, because normally a United team would collapse in that situation, and they controlled those even the last 10 minutes. I thought they controlled it very well.
Yeah, they did. They didn't look. They looked almost. They kind of not woke up, because they weren't sleeping before that. They were doing well, but they didn't kind of fall into their shell after the goal. They kept getting the outlet balls. They kept chasing it down. They kept making the moves that they needed to relieve the pressure and keep pushing it back out. And I think that, obviously where it helps a bit is a game like that has, of course, its own motivation. And, compared to, there's this difference, obviously, between a league game being at 85 minutes and it being tight, and an FA Cup final against City at Wembley and it being tight, in terms of just staying up and going for it. And I don't think there was, anybody whose heads dropped in the slightest after that goal. And they definitely looked more composed than I did at that point in time after the first goal went in, because I was thinking that we're about to see exactly what we've seen so many times. I was sure of it at that point in time. Like we've seen this story so many times, and yeah.
It was no, I agree. It was a nervy finish. Was thinking, what how's this going to work out? But they handled it really, really well. Let me ask you about Amrabat, because Amrabat plays and Casemiro, bit of a strange situation. Was initially in the squad. Ends up saying he can't play because of an injury. When I was watching the body language of the players on Saturday, maybe he was one of the few where I was like, definitely doesn't look like. Maybe I'm overly analyzing this, but it definitely didn't look to be the warmest handshake between the two.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen there, but it was maybe a blessing, you could say, because Amrabat came in, played really, really well, showed a lot of energy. I think he looks like someone that improves the more game time he gets. Like his passing distribution in the Arsenal game stuff was poor, but I thought he played really well against City.
Yeah, he did. Yeah. I don't know that. Is there any player that you would have a complaint about?
But would you
from the
keep
game at
Amrabat?
all? No, I wouldn't.
Mm.
I would look at it in a similar vein to the Wan-Bissaka argument, though I think Wan-Bissaka even has a bigger body of evidence. But as I was thinking about that, sorry to ask that question sort of in response to it, because there was nobody who was poor, right?
Mm.
And so I'm not going to use it necessarily to justify keeping anybody, you know what I mean? Because I know the squad needs an overhaul, a big one. We've known that over the course of the whole year. And I don't think there was a performance that would make me think differently, right? For Wan-Bissaka and the right back situation, maybe it's a little different because you have a starting right back. And if you have a starting left back, then you're really not going to see him that much. It's not a position of huge rotation, and it's more of like a specific usage case. But with Amrabat, I wouldn't. For a similar thing, he played well in a game where we were sat in a bit more. And when we've seen him play in games that are more progressive, it goes really bad, really poorly at times. And I think that I think he's maybe if we'd seen him more, I mean, that would be one of the things. I wish we'd seen him more in a midfield next to Kobbie Mainoo, where they're more compact, to get a better measure of him. But some of the games were so disastrous, that with him involved, that I haven't seen anything to swing me in that direction, especially not 25 million. For the age, for the profile, for all of that, I think you can do better. I think you can do significantly better.
Well, I think as always, it comes down to what your budget is and what the alternatives are, as opposed to what
Yeah.
It's going to be really interesting to see what type of players United sign this summer. The other major positive from the weekend was, of course, and it's becoming so normalized, and we're habituating ourselves so much to was once again just the genius of Kobbie Mainoo. I mean, that second goal was just absolutely beautiful, and he excites me more than any new signing. What a talent, what a player. He feels like we just signed him in January, and he's a sensational talent that if you'd signed him from Benfica or something, you'd be raving about him. His composure, his technique, his passing, his brain, his movement, his finishing, by the way, right? I mean, if you look at his last two goals, if you're a coach, there's a brilliant lesson to be taught to young kids in both of those. And he passed the ball into net both times. He passed the ball into net against Newcastle. Right, control, doesn't try to lather it, doesn't try to do anything fancy, just pass it in the corner. Right, yet the game on the weekend doesn't have to lather it, doesn't have to burst the ball, doesn't have to just pass the ball into a goal and make it look easy. And to have that level of composure at that age at these big games, remember, he was fundamental to beating Liverpool, right? Brilliant player, brilliant talent.
Yep.
Scored against Liverpool in the league game at Old Trafford. My God, what a ridiculous talent.
Yeah. I don't know that it's hard to say that there's enough words for what he does, because every time he keeps going out there and in these big games, he just takes it up a bit. You don't expect a player of his kind of position and what he does to also be scoring all these key goals that he has recently. But I don't know that there's a weakness in him. I've never seen anything like that. He plays with the composure and the awareness of somebody 20 years deep into their professional career at his age is remarkable. And in his first real senior season, a long time ago, there were some comparisons to Paul Pogba, and I can see that a lot. Obviously, different stature and all of that, but I can see it, and he looks a lot like what you would have wanted Pogba to do, just with the the extremely high levels of everything, the incredible ability to control and manipulate the ball that Pogba was world class at. Kobbie Mainoo is as good. I mean, it's incredible to see it, maybe not quite yet in terms of passing range, but everything else in terms of his work rate, awareness, all of that. It's hard to find better midfielder. And if you start to build that midfield better, right? And that's why I would say no to Amrabat, because when I look at the team and you have Bruno Fernandes as a world-class creator, and you have Kobbie Mainoo, one of the best talents we've ever seen, you've got to put the best player next to them. The best player next to them if you want, and that alone, that engine of the three players you've got in there alone will keep you in and win you games regularly if you build it right. But we've seen that not getting it right kind of nullifies so much of the talent that he has.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it's like, give him the best possible partner that you can get to function in that midfield, and I think the sky's the limit. I mean, and further.
Yeah, I wouldn't say Amrabat as a starter. He'd be a squad player for me.
Yeah.
But I'm not sold on either way. I mean, again, he's been here all season, and we're talking about 3-4 games, and is that really enough? The other one, of course, is Alejandro Garnacho. He scored the goal of the season at Everton. And again, this is one of the anomalies of the season, is that it's been an absolutely catastrophic season filled with so many unbelievable individual memories. But what a goal. And Everton scored again, like we said, the weekend against Vardiol, who he had, who of course, Vardiol's petrified because he's running at him. And Garnacho has pace. Scores the cup final, 19 years of age. He was brilliant when he came on against City last season. And almost dragged United right back in that game. Brilliant to see him score. It's easy to forget this kid's 19. What a season.
Yeah, what else can you say? I mean, I expect next season can get even better, and that's That's the incredible part about it, is this is the beginning, you know? When you look at guys like Jude Bellingham, some of the real midfield stars we've seen, can he be that level of player? Absolutely.
Let me ask you about something that's interesting, because United have looked an awful lot better with a false nine. And
Mm,
they're away players. I mean, if you look at they've scored 3 against Newcastle.
mhm.
Excuse me, false nine, scored 2 against Brighton. They were poor for large periods of that game. And one of the goals, of course, comes from Haaland when he comes on, picks the ball up from deep, runs and scores a goal. We've seen him score a few times this season. Against City's United false nine looked very, very good from an attacking perspective, looked much more compact in midfield. Do you think that that is something that will affect United's thoughts going forward and how they approach the striker situation?
Potentially, right? Because, you know, one of the things that we know is that, um, one of the different we've discussed before, like, one of the difficulties, reasons Rashford's role has changed quite a bit this year was, that they didn't bring in Harry Kane, which would have been quite a different type of striker, right, in terms of how he plays and his strengths, with runners coming off of him, things like that last summer. And, you know, Rasmus Højlund, when he's scored coming off the bench recently, has done so running into the spaces, right? Getting space in there, not on the break necessarily, but running into the space and not being glued to a defender. When he's played in recent months and struggled, a lot of it has been almost too much wrestling with the defenders, too much sticking to them and not getting into the spaces. Um, and the squad still, when you have these wingers and when you have these players playing in this way, definitely suits that central striker dropping in a bit. It makes for more defensive compactness too, right? Because they're not stretching so far forward. You get more compactness in the middle and you get the runners on the sides.
Mhm.
And you have to look at that. I mean, obviously, it depends how much squad turnover there is, right? But if you were to take this team today, yeah, I think it fits it. When Anthony Martial played before, right? Not anytime recently, but when he did before, United looked better. And when Ten Hag first came in, and in the preseason was playing with Martial, and when he got a few small chances last season to play Martial down the middle, they were better. They looked more. It looked more effective because he was a player who more. I wouldn't say he's necessarily a false nine, but certainly plays a bit more into dropping in deeper, picking up the ball, moving it around, and manipulating the spaces and creating. Um, you've got to consider it if you're going to build around Rashford and Garnacho on the wings. You have to consider it because we've talked about that, but 3 guys doing the same job down the middle,
Mhm.
it's a problem. It doesn't work that well, and it's too easy to snuff out. It's too easy. It's too hard to manipulate the defense when they're all doing the same thing in the same areas. And that's why we would see, you know, Højlund would not get goals, and you get McTominay running in there. And whenever they play together, it'd be McTominay scoring goals instead of Højlund, and you're sort of wondering why. You know, maybe in those games would be better if you didn't have Højlund in those games. Not this isn't about him, you know, as a player, obviously, but strategically, if he was dropping deeper and dragging defenders, you'd have even more space in there. So
I think
I think it is a tricky thing to think with because can Højlund play a bit more of that role, or is that nullifying his strong suits if you ask him to do that more?
I read a stat yesterday, or maybe I imagined it. Considering the substance I've ingested over the years, give me a mulligan here if I have, if my brain doesn't always fire correctly. But Holland hasn't scored in 9 semi-finals and finals in a row. This
Mm,
is the problem with the static number 9 against the top teams, right?
yes.
Who know how to suffocate you. And oh, he hit the bar yesterday. Well, Weghorst hit the bar last season in the cup finals. So what? In a 2-1 defeat, he wasn't particularly threatening at the weekend. And it's great if you're creating chances in the 6-yard box. He'll take him. It's still very valuable, important skill. But outside of that, he doesn't give you much else. and he's not great outside the box. He's not lightning quick. He's not. I mean, Haaland is a better footballer than Haaland outside the box. Um, you know, um, and I don't know if he's a better striker. You'd have to judge him in a City team, but
Mm.
I think for Haaland, brilliant goal scorer. But something Jamie Carragher said about Ronaldo a while back, saying, yes, he'll score you 20 plus goals, but does he make you a better team? And this is a
Mhm.
question that's been asked. I mean, it seems silly to be asking this question about Holland, given that they won the league and quadruple and stuff. But I wonder if City might have done that anyway without him. But yeah, I thought Lisandro Martinez, who's still not 100% match fit, by the way, handled him quite comfortably.
Mhm.
The other big, of course, things coming up over the last few weeks is the Rafael Varane situation. This was his last game. No doubt for me that when everyone's fit, Varane and Martinez, his best two centre backs. I thought he played really well. They're going to lose him. They now have to recruit. Martial also gone. These are
Yes.
big earners.
Mhm.
For Anthony Martial, for me, James, it will always be a question of what could have been. Ridiculous talent, very good footballer, never quite fulfilled his potential. There were times when I thought I wanted to strangle him, and there were times where I thought this kid has Ballon d'Or potential, and in some sense, it's a tragedy. But when players lose their career to injury, it's very difficult to be critical of the player.
Yeah.
I mean,
It is. It is. It's hard because it's like, how can you blame them for it?
mm,
The talent that they have, they're. I mean, you can argue in some instances whether it's what responsibility they have in it, but it's tough. It's tough,
yeah,
and in many cases, there's so many things outside of people's control, genetics, all of that come into
mm-hmm,
it to say, Luke Shaw, for example, is another one. Obviously
mm-hmm,
of a topic. His injuries, you have to 100% tie to the leg break from years ago.
mm-hmm.
Because he's never been able to maintain, his weight changed, his body shape changed, all of that because of such an extreme injury. Um, I doubt that he doesn't work hard. I doubt that he doesn't do his best to get on there, and he's an incredible player when he's there. So it's a tricky thing, right? When these things happen, and yeah, it's unfortunate.
Well, they have to send a left back. They have to get a left back in. They can't be in the same situation next season. That's unforgivable. And so, regardless of where Malassi is at, regardless of where Shaw is at, the season that
Yeah.
they've just had mandates that United sign a left back.
Yes.
Um, it's possible they could sign Brantwaite, who could also play left back and then play left centre back. So that you have that versatility, but he has to be able to play left back the way a top left back plays for the other teams. It can't
Mhm.
just be someone who can do a job there, because that is also fundamental to whoever plays on the left as a winger and getting the best out of them. You need a partnership between the left winger and the left wing back, and so that is. I brought this up before, but even when Memphis Depay had his best run of form at United, it was coincidental that it was Luke Shaw's best run of form when he'd first come to United, and I think that leg break also probably put an end to Memphis Depay's United career.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, look, at this level, that's very important because you play off each other. You have a
Yeah.
partnership down that left to attack together and defend together. So who plays there is really important for both. So even if you're a left back and you don't have a proper left winger, it's going to expose you. Because you're going to get done on
Yes.
overlaps and everything else. So that's really important. So yeah, again, I Luke Shaw, people have accused him of certain things. Mourinho was quite harsh on him, but the guy takes his shirt off. He's in unbelievable shape. I mean, I wish I
Yeah.
could play.
Yeah.
But clearly there's fitness standards at United that you have to conform to, and that Old Trafford Football Club, I don't have any concern about that, but I just don't think these injuries rarely improve as you get older. So
Yeah.
they usually become much more chronic, and it's something that United have to think about. And it prevents them from having to play Shaw when he's not 100%, which is something they've been forced to do this season. Okay, so what about in terms of recruitment this summer? So Martial's going, United will need to bring another striker in. The
Yeah.
question is, what type of striker? How old? How young? How much will they play? Or do they think, you know what, we're going to go with more of a false nine next season, so we don't need another striker? I think that'd be a mistake. So, what do you think about the forward position?
Yeah, I think that you probably, I would go for an older striker, because I think with the money and the potential that Rasmus Højlund has, 15 goals, 16 goals, right? It was very good, despite that, with the trickiness of this setup. I'd advocate for what I advocate for, which is that you change the winger profiles and you go forward with Rasmus Højlund and get an older striker that can support him, like Cavani did, similar in that vein. Somebody who can come in for some games. I mean, even Weghorst being available was better than nobody for the games that we played back then, Arnautovic, despite there being good reasons not to sign him otherwise, understandably, is the type of thing you'd want to bring in to support a striker and let them rotate, take some of the pressure off him. So I think that's where I would look to, because I think there's money you want to spend elsewhere to fix things up, and you've got a good young player in the starting position there, and you could probably find a good veteran, older striker. You see, I mean, Joselu at Madrid has them in the finals, at his age, and he's extending, but scored 2 goals to get them into the finals, and that's what you can get. You don't leave any stone unturned with something like that. You don't need someone who's a superstar. You need a good, intelligent, player to come in that can play some games, get some minutes, and score some goals and take some pressure off. So that's certainly what I would do in that position.
Onana at Everton to replace Casemiro.
That's a good one. I mean, that is a good one. That is a very, very good one. I would love him, because I think he's, again, I don't know that you need like a 100% destroyer type defensive midfielder. Onana has really good attributes. He's young, he's physical, he's big, he's very technical as well. I think he could develop into a really top player to go alongside Kobbie Mainoo. And yeah, I would say he'd be, given what's available or what's sort of available, obviously someone like Tchouaméni I would take in a heartbeat, if he had been available for Madrid, but not now. Onana looks really good. There's other options, but if you were going to spend bigger money and get someone, I really like him as well.
Well, inevitably, as we said, we would inevitably talk about Ten Hag and how that will affect recruitment this summer. And there seems to be some disagreement over a season review. It's been reported widely that United are going to have a season review with Ten Hag. I'm not quite sure when this happens, because he's on holiday. And according to him, the season review already happened when he was asked about it before the game. So I've got 2 questions on this. If the season review has already happened, and Erik Ten Hag's already been told whether he's staying or going, why don't we know?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, if you eliminate the FA Cup and some of the chatter since then, and you look at it last week, they were looking at managers. They were interviewing managers for a few weeks. The Athletic, on their podcast after the FA Cup final, said that they had very strong information that he was leaving. Prior to the FA Cup, they had that information. It could be as simple as getting a replacement in. There's a few articles about that that said, simply lining up.
I'm sorry, it's not good enough for me.
Well, I understand, but I mean,
they need to say something. Whether the replacements their
I
problem.
agree with that. No, yeah, yes. No. I agree in terms of saying something, right? But getting their acceptance plan line, their succession plan lined up, rather, is the word there. Yeah, I think it is a mess now. Like, I can understand it wanting to wait until the end of the season, getting close to the end of the season, I should say. I know, but we like I said, we're getting close there. But there's certain things that don't hold up to inspection now, and I start to say, it doesn't really make sense. One, on Tuesday, May 14th, everybody who's involved in the running of Manchester United met in Monaco. they've been interviewing managers since then. That sounds like an end of season review to me. Okay, when every one of your decision makers is getting together to discuss and make decisions about where you're going to go in the future, that sounds like a season review to me. Then Ten Hag says they've already had the season review, and they're interviewing and talking to managers and talking to people. It doesn't hold up. Add to that, Blanc was in Monaco for the F1. Joe Glazer's in Florida. Sir Jim is in Finland with his yacht. Has been spotted there on with some articles. Wilcox is maybe in London. Who knows? It doesn't sound like a season review is happening.
Doesn't sound to me like Manchester United is a priority of the owners. Sounds like Formula One yachting in Finland is the priority. Maybe
I mean,
like, you instead of banging off emails to the IT department, you might want to actually be there for probably the biggest decisions. You see, to me,
but the thing is, they can have a holiday, but the season review thing doesn't hold up to me. It doesn't, because if there's supposedly these big decisions to be made, then there's big decisions to be made. It's like. Yeah, then they should have been made. Either they're made or they're not. But it sort of doesn't make sense to me. And I think that obviously there's a philosophical, not a philosophical, but what's the word for it? I guess a discussion about how things should happen. Because one thing I feel very strongly about on this is that it's not that you can't take an FA Cup win and weigh it in, but you cannot take the finickiness of fans into account into your decision making. I know that there's a massive amount of support right now at the moment for Ten Hag. After Crystal Palace, it was at 39% on the poll that Manchester Evening News did, and now it's 76%. You start next season and you lose a few games, it's back down to 39%. That's how fans are.
This is a reflection of the fact that most people are undecided.
I agreed, yeah, but that's where you need leadership.
But James, there's two different questions here. There's the question: should Ten Hag be sacked, or who should he be replaced with? Right, and so those are not indistinguishable from each other. So,
of course, yeah.
if you want to sack Ten Hag, you should have done it already. There's absolutely no excuse or no benefit to Manchester United to not do it already, because the football club needs stability. The football club needs to have a very clear vision of where it's going. Ten Hag is owed better than that. Any manager that works for the football club is owed better than that.
Yeah.
And the other thing that doesn't make sense is when I look at the managers they're talking to, they're all very different managers. Thomas Frank, Gareth Southgate, whoever else they're talking to, these are all different managers. Kieran McKenna, they coach completely different ways. So what's your vision? Why are you speaking to people that have completely different, ideologies and philosophies? You should know. You should be following your own ideology and philosophy and targeting people that suit yours, not random people that have done a bit well because he's good. This is the decisiveness that Ineos said they would bring. Now, I'm optimistic about it, but to me, this reflects really poorly on them. I mean, they fucked up the whole the whole end of season party with the women. Totally unacceptable. By the way, I noticed United players had a party at the end, after party at the cup final. Totally unacceptable to do that, and for the women to find out in the media. That should have been a moment where Ineos stepped in and said, "Okay, no more of this stuff through the media. Okay, this is embarrassing. This is exactly the thing we said we would end." And they've known their manager's been hung out to dry all week. If they made it, if there was a decision made a week ago, then say that. If they haven't made a decision, which it looks like to me they're still deciding, which is hence why they didn't say anything. And there's obviously, for me, I'm guessing there's some contingency factors that they want Ten Hag to agree to keep his job. One of those that I've heard is that they want him to take a British assistant, right? Someone that he's very loyal to Mitchell van der Gaag. This is one of the things that they do with Gary O'Neill, is that they want Ten Hag to take a British assistant. I'll be honest, mate, and maybe I'm over fixating on this, but the whole British fixation from Ineos is starting to concern me a bit with Brexit, Jim.
Yeah, part of the challenge here a little bit, and to take with that is that, quite honestly, I think 90% of what has gone around in the last few days is nonsense. You
Well, that
know,
was that story right there, to be fair, was been around for a while, and it
but
was
Gary O'Neill
reiterated
isn't
that one.
British. Gary O'Neill's not British,
It is.
is he? Did I miss
Yes,
that?
it is.
Maybe I got confused because he's working for Wolves. But does it have
No,
anything to do with him being English, or simply because he was a good up and coming manager?
well, I mean, they obviously like him as a coach, but the fact that they want a British guy, that's yet to me
But why is it
prioritizes all the wrong things.
but
What
why
the
is
fuck
it
does it
because
matter
he's
where someone
British?
comes from?
Yeah,
Hmm?
you're right. Yeah, but why is it because he's British? Like what where I guess I'm asking,
I'm
where to me
assuming
does that come from?
I'm assuming it's because they want someone that has a relationship with the players that is not culturally Dutch or foreign,
Mhm.
where
Yeah.
they feel like someone local understands local issues a little. I don't agree with that. I think it's
Yeah.
total bullshit, and I think this goes back to the whole the manager needs to get the club. All this
Mm.
nonsense. Like, this is total nonsense. Once you start prioritizing someone's identity as a
Yeah.
qualifier, then you're an idiot. I'm sorry, and Jim Ratcliffe's clearly not an idiot, so I would really hope that that is not what's being prioritized for that reason. And this whole idea that Brailsford and or Ratcliffe and Joel Glazer, I mean, no, none of them have any idea what I
Mm.
highly doubt that Jim and Joel would let Eric Ten Hag do a review of their financial people and their companies for the same reason they shouldn't be doing one of a football guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Brailsford is not a football guy. He has his values, he has his strengths, and I just
Mhm.
hope that they are not the people leading these reviews.
Yeah.
Joe
I mean,
Glazer's obviously there because he's part of the board, right? But I
yeah,
would
and there's
sincerely hope that,
financial decisions too. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, like, obviously because there's still shareholders, there's a legal
Mhm.
obligation for him to be involved in those things. Hence why I was on the football board in the first place. But
Yeah.
you don't talk to other managers unless you're thinking about sacking your manager, right?
Correct, correct. I mean,
And,
the thing
yeah.
where I'm thrown. Sorry, where I got thrown
Mm.
and confused myself a little bit there, though, is one of the things that I see a big conflict on over the last few months on reports and things like that as well, is there's there's Ineos, but who are Ineos? When there's a lot of stuff that gets said about Ineos, and I say there's only two really people who are Ineos at United, which is Sir Jim and Sir Dave. Jean-Claude Blanc is in a very temporary role. He's not making big decisions, and he's also not really a football guy. He is, but his focus tends to be on financial, right? That's what he's done at every club he's been at, has been about the finances, stadium. Those are the things he's focused on in preparing for Omar Barada. Um, they've already said many times that they're not making these decisions. They're appointing people to make these
Mhm.
decisions. And so part of the where I get is I think that there's a lot of stuff that gets out there to rile people up because Sir Dave very much is somebody who's like a big British guy. He knows Graham Potter, he knows Gareth Southgate, he knows these guys. They're not the only ones. He has this high performance group that includes like Roberto Martinez, at his birthday party with some of the names being mentioned, Pochettino, Thomas Frank, who are not British, but he's not making the decision. Dave Brailsford has been leading on some of the things that are leading up to things like the Carrington renovation, which are things that make sense for him to be involved in, which are things that make sense for him to look at and understand. And I feel like it somehow goes this way of Ineos want to do this, and then understandably it gets people agitated because it is. If they're doing that, I don't want Sir Jim to say, "Ooh, yeah, I like that guy. Let's get that guy." He's no more qualified than Joel Glazer. I don't want Sir Dave to say, "I like that guy. Let's bring in that guy." He's no more qualified than Joel Glazer. None of them are. Joel Glazer's probably more qualified. He's been watching United longer than them. He's been involved longer than them, and we know how bad the decisions are of those things happening. Jason Wilcox was appointed at the instruction of Omar Barada, right? That has been reported really well that he was picked because of him. And I think that tells you, moving down the line, that there's probably been suggestion from Ineos, but even that Gary O'Neill story and the things about the assistant came out before Jason Wilcox was in the building. And I think that was a sincere problem, right? That if they hadn't got anybody in the door, they had a real problem this summer about making these decisions, because then they're going to be the ones who make them, and that's a mess. That is an absolute disaster. But I don't think they're making these decisions at all, and I think that there's a lot of stuff getting said based on that opinion of them making these calls, but I've not seen any evidence that they're making those decisions. They're making some very unpopular ones about emails and, about staff and working and, all of that, for sure.
I'm not against them bringing standards. It's perfectly fine. I just felt it was punching way, way, way down when there's more obvious problems to me that need their immediate attention.
I agree with you on that.
I said to you a couple of weeks ago, I said, regardless of what happens with the cup final, there needs to be clarification on Ten Hag future in the immediate aftermath. There's no more excuses for that not to happen.
And let me be clear, I am 100% agreement on that. I'm not avoiding criticizing them at all. Yesterday, I was getting a bit irritated about it, because I keep reading these stories about this fucking review. And like we said and discussed, I don't even believe it, because it doesn't.
Again, that's been reported by some highly credible people.
I understand, but it doesn't hold up. It doesn't hold up to inspection as part of the problem. Like, when I look at it, it doesn't really particularly make sense, right? And not to say that there aren't things that they are reviewing, right? That there's not things that they are looking at, but one, when, two, how, and then I look at the actions of the last few weeks, and I say that is the actions of a club that is already acting upon decisions that they've made. That is already. Yeah, and
every day is an embarrassment that they don't announce it. There's absolutely no excuse for that. I don't understand. If you've made that decision and you've decided that that's the direction you're going to go with, it's basic common decency to then have an agreement with the individual who's going to be replaced. I mean, that's what I would want in my job. That's what you would want. That's what any human being would want. And that's fine. Right? Ten Hag's he's a grown up. He's a man. He understands this is part of the game. This is a highly probable outcome. So just have the decency to sit down and talk to him. This would be worse, in my opinion, than what they did with Van Gaal. Because dragging it out when the football club and players and new signings need to know who's picking the team next season so that they can actually play for this guy. This is exactly the type of thing Ineos said they would end. That they would bring a level of professionalism and decisive decision making and analysis and the forensic analysis that's going to lead the decision making. But it's easy to put Jason Wilcox in place. It's easy to put him on Barada in place. Now comes the money decisions. Now comes what you thought you said you would bring. And listen, if I read in 5 minutes from now they've sacked Derek Ten Hag, I'll be like, okay, well,
they did what they were going to do,
but not doing it, not saying either way. You need it. We're 4.5 weeks away from July.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you got in 4 weeks. You got to start making sure you bring in a couple of players. You got to make sure that the manager situation is sorted. You've got the Euro. They have so much work to do. What you're sitting on a yacht? Where did you say? In Finland and Monaco, the Monaco Grand Prix. Fuck the Monaco Grand Prix. I don't care about Monaco Grand Prix. I don't care how many icebergs you had in Finland. I don't care how many yacht parties you're having in Monaco. I don't care about Manchester United. You want the sport and control. You have it.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, well, it is of the essence.
I have a different opinion.
It is of the essence. It is of the essence, because again, like, I don't, as I was saying on this, to be slightly fair on this, but this is that I don't want them making these decisions, right? I don't want them to, but they should be pressing that it's kind of done, and all I'm saying is what it leads me to believe is that they're just buying time for whatever reason, to let things sort down. Which I understand, which doesn't really make sense to me that you know, it doesn't none of it really makes sense to me. I just don't think it does. I really don't.
Do you think that people are going to stop talking about the Manchester United manager's position in the next couple of weeks? It's insane.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. All I'm getting at is that, you know, when I look at it, I agree. To me, it's become a mess, because I think the problem is, after everything that happened last week, if you turn around now and you don't let him go, look at let's face what it looks like. And some of it is true, that you were interviewing managers behind the manager's back, that you don't trust him, that you didn't give him any reassurances about his position. Simon Stone said ahead of the FA Cup that he was offered no statement about whether the story of him being sacked, regardless of the FA Cup, was true or not. That is not a good relationship. That is not a good way to have it's not a good way to have a relationship. It's not a good way to run things. And if you turn around on that and don't do it, you got a lot to walk back, and you have a lot to explain, because I'm not buying that. We've talked about this before. I'm not buying no value in the market. I'm not buying that you said, well, yeah, but we were just looking at other options and we decided Ten Hag is the best. I'm not buying that. Not for 1 second am I buying that, because that is not how you operate. That is not how any club operates. And if you decided he wasn't the guy, it's your job to go out and get someone better. That's your job. If you can't do that, it tells me you're either incompetent or you couldn't stick to your principles. And that's a concern now, that they've put themselves, to me, in that corner where, you know, I think they've really put themselves in a corner with it at this point in time. And people may celebrate it, but the worst thing for me in general with these owners coming in, the only thing I wanted to change, stay, go, anyone like that, is that they stuck to management principles, that decisions were made by professionals, and that they were decisive, and that they went forward and followed through on the things that they said that they were going to do. If they don't do that, whether they get it wrong or right, if they don't do that, then I have no faith in them making decisions moving forward that aren't going to be swayed based on this or that or the other, or they're not going to back off, or they're not going to fail and then pretend they didn't do it in the first place. I just bringing up a story on this, it reminds me to some degree of Mason Greenwood, okay? For example, last year, you had pretty solid information that Mason Greenwood was going to return to Manchester United last year, that they were set to bring him back, and that there was a whole plan to reintegrate him and all of that. Right or wrong, via backlash and things because of leaks that came out, they then flipped around and said, we were never going to do that. That was never our plan. And we were never going to keep him, actually. It wasn't decided, and we're sending him away. Nobody believes that. And that was the actions of...
strategy here, man.
I agree, because you're no different to Richard Arnold if you do that. You are no different to Richard Arnold if you did that. And I thought it was I thought it was totally spineless. You know, the way that was played out was spineless and cowardly, because it wasn't about getting the right answer. It's about, if you say you're going to do us, they did the same thing, right? This is why it reminds me so much of it. They said they had this 6-month process, you know, reviewing the situation of Mason Greenwood, all of that, and they lead to an outcome. And then they changed it at the last minute. Come on, you can't operate that way. And if they do that, I have serious concerns on them. So, you know, I think they can't let this go much longer. It has to be done. What they're doing has to be done.
None of this. No, it's a massive decision in terms of how United play next season and how they prepare, and you would imagine that United have, at the very least, you know, been in contact with players for months. If they haven't, or, you know, we have big problems, and
they can't move yet.
But I mean, you still sign them, but technically they can't come for you. You know, you still sign players; it's not a problem. But they would want to know who's picking the team.
But that's what I mean by they can't move yet, because there's other decisions that this has to be finished.
Yeah, but why don't you make them?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, make them. You know, Ten Hag doesn't sit there at 5-3 going, I don't know who I'm going to pick. I don't know who I'm going to pick. If I drop this guy, we're going to get negative reaction. The media's going to go. You have to make a fucking decision. That's your job. Just Roy Keane said, that's your job. You come, look.
I know.
This is your football club now. It's
Yeah.
not the Glazers. I know they're still technically the majority owners, but it's yours now. Okay.
Yep.
Now you're in charge of the decisions that seem so easy from the outside. You have to make on the inside. Okay.
Yep.
Because I'm gonna tell you something, Chase, right? They can sack Ten Hag, that's easy. Okay. If their replacement starts badly, it doesn't do well, God help them. Because
Yeah.
the criticism that they're going to get is going to be unlike anything they'll ever experienced. Okay. And they're, the certainty that they have in their own decision making and their own ability, you'll start to question. And it's going to be an unforgiving environment for whoever replaces Ten Hag, because you and I both know how this works. There's lots of
Yes.
people who wanted Solskjaer sacked. A year later, all the videos of Solskjaer's high moments, the lovely football was played at times, and the pining for that. And people will forget the negatives. People will forget, will remember the highs, they'll remember the way it ended. And it's going to be really easy to sit there with Ten Hag if someone else plays, starts badly, going, we got rid of a guy that had 3 finals in 2 seasons. I think we made a mistake. Or, Mourinho, I was quite harsh on Mourinho. And as time went on, I had to realize that time spoke, as we said, that it was that there were certain things that I blamed him for that weren't his fault. And this is where anyone's have to get. I'm still optimistic, and I'm glad they're there.
Yeah.
But as a United fan, they have to be held to the same standard any other owner would be held for. And to me, there's no reason why this decision hasn't been made one way or another. Not saying
executed.
Okay, do you want to get a couple of questions here before we split? Or do we have
Yes. Yeah. Let's do a few questions. I have a couple from tweeting. I don't know if you have a few. If you want me to do mine first.
You go ahead. You do yours, man. I just retweeted yours.
Yeah. Somebody asked, not in this exact language, but they asked about there's some rumors of Rashford to Arsenal, and I picked this out because I'd asked some people about Rashford's situation over the weekend. I got a little worried. He looked a little bit sad at first, coming off of the FA Cup win at first, but it got better as the night went on. It looks like, for sure. But somebody asked about that, because then following that, there were some rumors about Arsenal and Rashford, and the situation is really no different. There's teams that are interested in Rashford. There's not been anything in terms of discussion about him leaving, about an offer, or about joining another team. And he posted yesterday that he was going off social media to focus on things and all of that. And I think that's good. I think he'll use this summer really, and the time off from the Euros, really, really well to focus and reorient as he can, and kind of get back to basics on there. There was another one. Any update on the potential new renovated stadium? As I had heard last, they were still looking at obviously they're still doing plannings, and this is a long process, but one of the things they're also looking at the viability of, which changes the plans, is if is the whole kind of scaling Old Trafford down to use it as a women's and academy stadium as well. And that would obviously change, like if you're demolishing it, if you're scaling it down, if you're building all of that. So I think there's quite a few moving parts on this before that gets up and running. But they've obviously had a lot of meetings, done a lot of work with the local government councils, things like that, to do this.
They met with Sebco. Obviously, Sebco is part of the team that's fronting this, and Andy Burnham, of course, from Manchester. It's not, if you knock Old Trafford, you move to another stadium. If you move to another stadium, you have to factor in all the logistics. How does it get supplied by public transport? These are things that the city have to get involved in. Traffic congestion, all these other variables that you have to consider that are endless, that are not straightforward. And then there's the question of how much financially is the city going to contribute towards this, because it is a joint venture, there's no doubt. So there's lots of questions still to be answered on that in terms of exactly what they're going to do. But it would seem highly probable, most likely outcome is that they'll build a new stadium. It's just cheaper and easier, and but what they'll do in the meantime is going to be a big question. I don't know, but I think there'll be progress on that quite soon. And they'll talk about the training ground too. But like I said to you before, one of the things that I question, I worry about in the back of my mind is if 6-7 months into this, United are still in the same position they're in, playing, being poor, losing games. It's an underwhelming summer. It's, a manager's in trouble. The criticism that Ratcliffe and all those people are going to get will be unlike anything they've ever experienced. Is the appetite still there in your 70s to put up with this and go through with the full sale? Because all the loving will be over. If it goes well, great, which I pray it does. But I wonder, the sooner Ratcliffe puts money in investments in the infrastructure, the better. Because if he doesn't have money in investment in infrastructure, that is a long-term commitment. I would worry about that.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not so worried about his attitude. I mean, just to a large degree, I think, the flip side of that is, of course, this will be his legacy, right?
Yeah, but
he is older.
It can be two ways. Your legacy can be negative.
Yeah. Well, he's gonna have to work hard to make it positive. He's got to get some things right. That's for sure. But they definitely. I mean, at the end of the day, the biggest thing is getting the success on the football pitch, and it's easier to get all this other stuff done as long as we're winning and doing well. Otherwise, you're gonna get criticism no matter what you're doing if you're not winning. That's the truth of it, of course, underneath it all. Couple of other, maybe two other questions. One of the things that was touched on, there was a question about the changes at Carrington and whether it would impact a squad. Now, there's actually two things happening with Carrington because, like Ten Hag said, they're actually going to knock it down and rebuild it. In the short term, they're renovating it to get it up to standards that they viewed. There's a report of that kind of detailing all of it, but they've shut it. Actually, I believe now was what was reported is nobody can be there at the moment. And I think by the time the players are returning, they're expecting to have finished some of these refurbishments, but essentially, working to get it up to implement certain things, get it up to certain standards in the short term, and then in the long term, knock it down and potentially move or build something new, whatever it may be. So I don't think it'll impact things because it'll be up and running, and then they'll obviously work out some sort of plan if they're rebuilding it, where they have a different place to go to in the meantime, or they'll build somewhere new and they'll work in the refurbished one until the new one is built. So I don't think there should be any real disruption with any of that aspect of it. I think the stadium is way more complicated than the training ground stuff. Yeah, and then there was a general question about there's been some reports of things like Thomas Tuchel feels like he has the job and all of that have come out. And obviously we've discussed this kind of at length, but these are, of course, part of the reasons you need clarity because, agents are going to talk and they're going to rile people up as well. And there's going to be a lot of stories that come from things, one of the things with the McKenna story is that came out, like, obviously, there were sort of links to Kieran McKenna. And he made sense from a perspective of like a young coach, these types of things, all of that. But one of the interesting kind of narratives that I saw was that some people built it up as if he was like this leading candidate, top choice. And I don't know where that came from, to be quite honest, this concept that he was. But this is what happens when, people are filling the noise. That you get these types of things because agents talk. And what happened at the end of it? He signs a contract quadrupling his wages at Ipswich is the outcome of all of that. And that's what happens and fills up. And it's dangerous letting these things run because, fans can build up narratives in their own mind and then when it doesn't.
So how long did it take Ipswich to address the manager situation?
Yeah, what was it? A week? Yeah.
Amazing what you could do.
I know. It's
Let me ask you this.
Decisive. Yeah.
United have sacked Ten Hag after Crystal Palace, and I don't know. Thomas Tuchel would have did the weekend what Ten Hag did. You know exactly what would be said. See, this is what a real manager looks like. This is a difference between a top manager and Ten Hag. This is how you set a team up. This is how you play again. All of that would 100% be said. And so, City's the benchmark. If your manager can go out and do that against City and you want to replace him with a guy that's never managed one single game in the top flight in the history of his career, are you fucking insane? I mean, I like Kieran McKenna and I want him to do well. But there's a massive difference between getting promoted with Ipswich and taking the Man United job. One thing I like about McKenna is that he knows internally the chaos the football club has and what would need to be fixed for him to succeed. There has to be another intermediate level before McKenna gets to United, before you can say, okay, I'm confident. Because, you know, Rob Edwards, how many top jobs is Rob Edwards being linked with? How many top jobs is Chris? I know companies going to.
I mean, Maresca got the Chelsea job after.
Maresca came up with Leicester, right? But Chelsea don't know what they're doing, right? Chelsea aren't looking for a top manager. You tell me Enzo Maresca is a better manager.
And I mean, I would definitely say they sacking Pochettino.
You get sacked for doing a good job at Chelsea.
Crazy for them.
They don't do what they did. Yeah. So to me, that they're a barometer of what idiocy looks like, and they will have enormous resources and energy, a commitment level, dedication to running that club like a business.
But the last thing on this, Phil, right? Like, just I think that we can both agree on philosophically is that, you know, they're going to have to make these decisions themselves.
Yeah, but I don't want them to make it or anything.
Yeah, and then they're going to be judged on that, because there's only one way they succeed, which is they make the decisions themselves based on what they think is best, and it works. If they don't make those decisions, or they make because they're worried about what people think, or they make the wrong decisions, they'll fail. But the only way that they can succeed is by doing what they think is best and then being judged for it. And that's the only way we can really judge them. But that is what we would want out of managers, out of an owner group, is make the decision you think is right, and it either works or it doesn't. And that's the only judgment I can make.
100%. Yeah. And it's exactly what I'm asking for.
And that's all I want them to do. Make it. Just do it. Do what you intend to do, period.
100%. And look, it may be a Gary O'Neill, Areola situation where you sack a popular manager because it's the question marks isn't, is he a good manager? Is he a great manager? There's different things. And you go to someone who's much better. That totally, I accept that. And look, James, the finishing 8th, you know, the goal difference, the Champions League, absolute catastrophe. It just is abomination. Like finishing bottom in a Champions League group is an abomination. Right, it is unacceptable. You know, the minus goal difference, the fact that United are still a counter-attacking team 2 years in, the fact that they're still one-dimensional. These are all legitimate reasons that Ten Hag deserves to be heavily criticized on. I'm just saying that the way it's being handled is totally wrong.
I agree with that.
Yeah, there's factors for that exonerate him. But anyway.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're on the same page. There's always going to be difference in fans' opinions on specifics, on details, on things like that. But what we all should want and hope for is that this is different to the Glazers, and that means being decisive, making your decisions the right way, and sticking to them and following through. That's really,
I completely agree with you. That's my view too. Are there any more?
That's it. That's all I have for now.
Well, I suppose we'll see what our recording schedule is throughout the summer.
Yeah.
I'm still up for doing week after week if there's enough to talk about.
There'll be some Euros and things to go along with, certainly news and all that to talk about. So it should be rather interesting, at least.
Yes.
Some things to discuss.
Yes, so we'll be back. Thanks to all of you for downloading the podcast throughout the season. As always, much appreciated for all your downloads, likes, retweets, supporting the podcast, all your subscriptions, your questions, everything else. It is extremely appreciated. We're extremely grateful to have your ear for as long as we have it every week, and it is something that means a lot. Very, very grateful, and to all the United podcasters out there who do the same. Thanks for all your entertainment. James, take it easy, mate.
Yes, you too.
All the best, Pop. Yeah, bye.